Do you ever just get the hankering for like, being in the mood to just, I don't know, blame a victim?
Huh?
Anybody? No? Do you ever just feel like just
these victims out here, I just need to sock it to them, because what is wrong with them, you know? Like, I need to put some blame on them or something. Just can't stand them.
You know, a victim. So a victim, like someone who's been harmed by a crime or even an accident, someone who's been betrayed, something like that. Those people. Don't you ever just want to go blame it on them? No?
No!
I wouldn't think so. But you know what? Crazy thing is, it happens so much, it's like an epidemic. Victim blaming. It's so rampant in today's society. We see it in online spaces. We see it in everyday life. We see it at our schools, at our jobs. We see it in court cases, all over the place. So it's really common. There's going to be some people that even just hearing the topic of victim blaming are going to feel, for some reason, catapulted into anger and want to get angry about this video about things that are not victim blaming. For instance, usually something about someone who's not a victim, who's just acting like a victim. So that's not the same issue. That wouldn't be victim blaming to talk about that. So those two don't go together. So when we're talking about victim blaming, we're only talking about victims, people who actually suffered at the hands of something terrible or someone. What is the definition of a victim? A person, animal, or entity that suffers direct physical, emotional, or financial harm, injury, or death, often due to a crime, accident, or misfortune. It also refers to someone cheated or fooled by another, or a person sacrificed in a ritual. Ooh, it's very specific. And it says synonyms include sufferer, prey, target, casualty, or innocent. So one thing that's pretty assumed about a victim, just inherently in the definition, is that there's a level of innocence to what happened to them. So they do not have any blame or fault in what happened to them. They were an innocent person who in no way, shape, or form deserved to have whatever happened to them happen. That is the automatic embedded definition when you use the word victim. In my last episode about Donald Trump, I told you about the 25 to 28 different women who have come forward and been alleged victims of Donald Trump for sexual misconduct. That's a lot, you know? That's a lot of people to be accusing you, okay? I went over the main names that we've seen a lot in the media that have come out through the years. I didn't go over every single one, but I went through a good portion of the 25 or so women. But I specifically did not cover one victim on purpose. And that reason was because I was going to cover that victim in a different episode. So there is one victim that accused Donald Trump of sexual misconduct, where those accusations didn't just remain accusations. One victim who got to go all the way through, see it through an entire case in trial, sit before a jury of 9 peers and a judge, testify, tell her story, and saw that through to a verdict. And the verdict was that Donald Trump was found civilly liable for sexual assault and also defamation of Carroll. The reason I talk about victim blaming at the beginning is because this is a case that, just as much as I hear how wild it is that someone was able to become president after they were found civilly liable for sexually assaulting a woman, I hear just as often so many lies about this case when the case is completely public record. It's available for anybody who wants to know the truth. I know a good portion of that is not just because they support Donald Trump, but also falls in line and tends to lead to the action of victim blaming, despite the official ruling after a full-on trial with loads of evidence and a unanimous verdict from a 9-person jury, being, by the way, 6 men and 3 women, if that tells you anything, and a judge, where Donald Trump was found civilly liable, meaning that he did the sexual assault. He committed the act, and then he was then served a penalty for doing so. Carroll won her case. So if you then reject that verdict and you say,
No, that's not true. He didn't do that.
I guess that's your prerogative. But it tends to be the people that don't know anything about the case. The people that can't name one piece of evidence that was put forth in the case. And then also the portion that seemed to be very upset at Carroll as a person. They want to attack her mannerisms, her personality, her past. They want to attack maybe how she was behaving. There was so much different information that I was always hearing about this. Obviously, it was very alarming to me, which I would think it would be to anyone, but that's not the case. But it compelled me to want to look into it fully. And so I did my research and I learned about the case. All the facts from front to back. Donald Trump's side, Carroll's side, every single person's testimony, all the witnesses, all the evidence. And I just learned the truth. It's interesting to know that most Trump supporters, nearly across the board, when asked, would you stop supporting Donald Trump if you knew that he sexually assaulted a woman? And to be clear, I'll get into the explanation of this, but it was labeled sexual assault. But that was because of very strict New York definitions legally at the time that have now since been actually modified due to this case, because what occurred was the R word, 100%. The judge declared that at the end of the trial, even though the verdict was labeled sexual battery or sexual assault. It was full on R word. Okay. And so when Donald Trump's supporters are asked this question time and time again, and they'll kind of push back a little bit.
Well, he didn't do it.
And it's like, okay, this is hypothetical. We're saying if he did, would you stop supporting him? And they will 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, they will say,
Yes, of course, I would stop supporting him.
Okay. Yet and still, then when presented with the case of Eugene Carroll, they start doing backflips and flip and gymnast tricks all over the place to walk back what they just said and find some way to still support him. And one way that they do that is by victim blaming Eugene Carroll. And so today I'm going to go over the case, set the record straight. I'm just going to give you the information from the trial itself, the documents that are available, public record. I'm going to give you some background on the people involved. I'm going to tell you what happened. You would think that's what anyone would want to do. Why would you not want to find out all the facts about something that serious before you just have an opinion on it? So anyone who wants to claim that Donald Trump did not do what he did to Eugene Carroll should very much so first know all the facts about the case. Let's get into it.
What I think is the best way to present it would be to take it in as it happened in chronological order. So I'm going to take you guys back in a time machine, essentially, and just take you through it as if you were living it in real time. So, ta-da, here's my time machine. We're going to be taking a ride in it. Okay, so let's get in. And first stop, we're going to go back to the year 1943.
Whoa!
Okay, 1943, guys. Going to the Midwest. Let's go. We're here. Let's go look around.
So why are we in the 40s and why are we in Detroit? Well, that's because Eugene Carroll was born here. Oh, look at little baby Eugene. Sorry. Let's talk about Eugene Carroll's life leading up to when this occurred. Eugene Carroll was born in 1943, Detroit, Michigan, and she was raised in Indiana. And fun fact, I was born in Indiana. Okay, just saying. So she attended Indiana University, where she was a cheerleader, and a beauty queen. Actually, Miss Indiana University, big time. Big things, okay? Thank goodness she didn't go on to continue in beauty pageants, or she may have run across Donald Trump even sooner. Anyway, so her early career in media started in the 1970s, contributing to many different publications. She wrote for Rolling Stone, Esquire, Outside Magazine, and her style was marked by her wit, her irreverence, and a lot of boldness. During the 70s, she really just began establishing her reputation for being sharp, humorous, and fearless in both interviews and personal essays. And then in the 1980s and 90s, she was really rising to her prominence of her career. So first of all, in 1993, a very important year for Eugene, a big one, that she became widely known for her column, which was Ask Eugene, and that was in Elle magazine. And she continued to write for Elle magazine and that column all the way up until 2019 when the lawsuit was filed. And so that was a 25-year consecutive stint running that column. So that's huge. That's a great achievement. It was a popular advice feature and it ran for over 25 years. It had what you would call like a cult following, and it really helped to solidify her reputation as one of the few major female advice columnists with a very feminist, cheeky, and very like direct tone. She was no BS. The column focused on relationships and sex and life issues, but often with like a biting humor and also an unexpected depth. So she was real witty, but she had a lot of substance to her. And then during this time, she also hosted a TV show on America's Talking, and that was in 1994.
Okay. So what we want to do is hone your skills just in talking with men, and we don't want you to see them because we don't want you to be swayed by how they look. We want you to develop your mental capabilities in judging a man, okay?
Right.
Okay, so I'll ask, their names are Andre, Michael, and Scott. Let's just see if you can divine if they're your type of man just from their answers, okay?
Okay. Scott, I'm planning to be an actress. Tell me about the big scene we would play together.
A film I just seen recently, Bullets Over Broadway, at the end, John Cusack and Mary Louise Parker, their characters kind of reconcile, and they realize they really are in love with one another and that they belong together. And it was kind of, it's a comedy, so it was funny and romantic, and I kind of go for that kind of thing. I think that would be the scene.
What did you think of that answer?
I love that answer because I love Woody Allen films.
Oh, and did you notice he went into detail?
Right.
So he's showing you his stuff.
Right.
That's good. Okay.
Now, the show itself was pretty short-lived, but it was a part of her larger effort to translate her success from print to broadcast. And then there was also a career that she had in books and writing. So in 1985, she published Hunter, The Strange and Savage Life of Hunter S. Thompson. And then in 1995, she released her best-known book, which was Mr. Right, Right Now, which was a dating advice book with her signature offbeat tone. Her writing usually would blend self-help with social commentary. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the public image that Carroll had prior to the tainting with the Donald Trump incident. Carroll was well known in literary, fashion, and magazine circles, and she was known as like sort of a zany, unapologetic New York media personality. Everyone you could talk to at that time, they loved her. She was quirky, she was fun, she was free-spirited, she said what was on her mind. That's how everyone referred to E. Jean. She did have a cult status rather than so much of a mainstream household fame, but people in publishing and like the magazine industries, the people on the inside, they certainly knew her name very well. She was very popular in those circles. Her work championed female empowerment, also sexual independence of women, and women taking like unconventional life paths, which was a big deal at the time. I mean, the 80s was still a long way that women had to go. We weren't super independent by then in social status and all social constructs. So E. Jean really stood out because she was often in contrast to more traditional conservative advice columnists that were more widespread at the time. So she was different and unique, always stands out.
Well, E. Jean knows Donald Trump kind of the same way that we all knew of Donald Trump. You know, he was a real estate investor. He was a big businessman. He was the apprentice person guy. And she just had a little bit more of an insider knowing to him prior to the 90s a little bit because she ran in the same circles. She was at events where Donald Trump was. The same media events that she would be invited to, Donald Trump would often be in attendance as well. So they had been in the same circles. He knew her name. He knew what she did. He knew who she was in the industry, and the same vice versa. The fateful day occurred at some point in 1996, and E. Jean is very open about not knowing the precise day that this happened. She didn't make note of it. She just knows that it occurred around 1996. And to be very clear, what occurred was that E. Jean Carroll was shopping at her favorite store in Manhattan that is called Bergdorf Goodman's, which is a very high-end department store. Bergdorf Goodman is similar to that of like a Neiman Marcus or a Saks Fifth Avenue or even a Bloomingdale's. Okay, so it's one of those big department stores that is for luxury, high-end apparel and accessories. And it was very popular in New York. She was looking for something. She was just shopping around. She didn't really find what she was looking for, and she would go there often after her work days. This day didn't seem any different, but it was. Because on this day, when she went to exit the store, coming in through the other side of the revolving door was Donald Trump. To her surprise, to her pleasant surprise actually, she notes. She was like, wow. And they both kind of stopped and looked at each other, and she says that he said to her,
Hey, you're that advice lady.
so he recognized her. She recalled that very clearly. And then she said back to him,
Hey, you're that real estate tycoon.
something like that. I forget the exact words that she used for him, but something similar. And he said,
Maybe you could give me some advice.
okay, that's how it started. And he then went on to tell her that he was there looking for something for a gift for a woman. She then ended up helping him out as best she could. In the process of that, they ended up on a different floor of this store that was at the present moment completely unattended, and no other shoppers were anywhere in sight. And at one point there was a dressing room involved where they ended up inside the dressing room, and Donald Trump then closed the door and abruptly came on to E. Jean Carroll, forcing himself upon her, and ended up sexually assaulting her. She says the incident inside the dressing room lasted no more than about 3 minutes tops, and she largely just shoved it down, went through the healing process of that afterwards. She found herself too afraid of the consequences of coming forward, the way that it would harm her reputation, the way that it would mark her as a victim of Donald Trump instead of the beloved columnist that she has built herself to be. Her career was at its peak at this time. There was no reason for her to come forward because of the way that it was handled most of the time. Why would she? She knew that she would get tons of attention and it would get all this praise and she would be attacked. She would be talked about terribly. A lot of people would hate her probably. That's just what happens. And so she didn't want to go through that. She wanted to continue her legacy and everything she had worked so hard for, and that's how she wanted to be remembered. She had never had any trouble with having men be attracted to her. She had been married before, and she was somebody that was no stranger to love. She'd had her fair share of rendezvous, and something about this moment was really obviously changing for her, because she said that she was never after that able to be intimate with another man. She was never able to get close to a man that way ever again, trust them enough, or even get close enough to be in a situation where intimacy could even occur, because she just wasn't ever interested in that. She felt repelled against it. And I think that's one of the saddest details about the case. A lot of it, she said, was due to the trauma related to how painful it was, because it was actually physically painful because of the way it was done, but also just something internally, something just with trust was a big deal. Men just didn't quite, they just weren't received the same way anymore by her. Eventually, she moves into this cute little cabin in the woods that's just very secluded, and it's her own little paradise. There's just greenery everywhere, and she has her dogs, and she picks berries and plants flowers, and she throws the ball to her dogs, and she's just settled into this very cozy and quaint life where she's doing exceptionally great, because her column has been running for nearly 26 years at this point, which is one of the longest running advice columnists in America ever. And she's kind of a big deal. She's living out her dream, and she's very content with her life. There's just one little thing that she's never quite been very content with. And that's something that happened in a dressing room in 1996 with a man named Donald Trump that she has kept to herself for many years. And the Me Too movement started way back in the early 2000s, but it really didn't get the viral publicity and big popularity that it got, that we all widely know it as today, until around 2017 with the takedown of Harvey Weinstein and all of the big names that started to come forward and say exactly what the movement is called. Me Too. It happened to me too. People like Ashley Judd and Rose McGowan and people that were well known and well loved saying me too. And so many women then followed suit. What happened was some very brave women came forward and they paved the way for other women to see, okay, the justice system is in a place right now, or the social culture of this time is in a place right now where there is a pathway where I might be believed. This might actually go okay for me, when that's not been the case most of the time for women coming forward about things like this. Okay, so they saw an opening, and then they all started taking it. Essentially, in the end, their cases were heard, their stories were held with some credibility, and actually looked into and treated like any other crime that was committed. And the man who did the crime was actually held accountable and removed from his high up position of power. It was glorious. It was something rarely seen in history at that point. And so E. Jean saw this like everyone else. And she started to have this, little voice inside of her that had always really been there, was starting to get louder and more persistent and saying,
Maybe you should say something.
She watched this man run for president. She watched as other women accused him of things on a legal scale less serious than what happened to her, and she saw those allegations go nowhere. She watched as he batted off those court cases that were brought forth. She watched as he talked them down, he paid them down, he, whatever he did. And she saw even a man with that reputation win. And so it was really getting to her. She started to really think about what her experience has been with men over all the years. She started to then think about the role that she's played in life as this advice columnist to these 8 million some readers over time. And they write into her for advice, and she answers them. And she's thought about the advice that she's been giving for these decades. Some of the biggest issues that they had plaguing their lives, their biggest problems, all of the hurt and pain, the worst things that ever happened to them, all were caused by men. Those are her words. Okay, not mine. She realized that she's constantly giving advice about how to heal and how to deal with the pain caused to women by men. Many of her listeners experienced SA, R-word, abuse, and she thought about what had been the advice she had given. Well, for one, she was highly compassionate to each individual, but with some fiery oomph and some inspiration and some motivation their way. She always inspired them, encouraged them to advocate for themselves. Speak out. Only what they're comfortable with, but tell someone. Speak up about it. Lift your voice up. She thought, you know what? I could just come out with my story, sure, but I want to know what women's experience is as a whole, and I want to be accurate with that. So I want to talk to as many women as I possibly can, and you know what? I'm going to go do that. And so what she did was she hopped in her car and she went on a road trip to do some, I guess, investigative journalism, it would be called, for something she was planning to write, a book about how men shape the lives of the women they are directly in contact with, and a lot of it centering around the negative impacts and the way that women are largely affected by power dynamics like that. And it's largely underestimated the number of stories like that exist. And so she went out to discover. She said she wanted to go to every city that she could think of in a certain vicinity that was the name of a woman. Okay. So she began writing the book. It was about her experiences with traveling all around to those cities and stopping women and talking to them about how men have affected their lives. And she called this book, What Do We Need Men For? And the most pressing theme of it was just asking that question. It was to show the world how it's not all about women being able to vote and the fact that, you know, we're allowed to have jobs outside of the home now, and there's still such a patriarchy in existence, and that there's still such a power imbalance and an inequality that exists. Basically just trying to show women that, just like for anybody, a man or a woman, a man doesn't base his worth and his success off of if he's able to obtain a partner. If he finds a suitable partner that he likes, then he has one. But if not, and he plays the field and he doesn't have one partner, he can still be successful and still be very well respected. But a woman, for some reason, we know the reason, even if men just are the source of abuse after attack, after sexual assault, after all of these traumas, all of the worst things that ever happened to you in your life, they've all been at the hands of men. But for some reason, that's still women's number one pursuit, is like,
I need to be loved by a man. I need this.
Why?
and sometimes women allow their story to be dictated by what happened to them with men. And Carroll's point was to really open readers' eyes to the fact that, hey, women, it's actually okay if you don't have a man, if you don't have men in your life, if you just go live your life and you do what you want, that's okay. And find your happiness outside of existing for and of a man. Have your own story, and maybe it won't be this trauma-filled one. And so that was her goal. And she planned on highlighting her own life and her own experience with what she called the most hideous men that she'd encountered, the most hideous things that had happened to her throughout her life involving men. She compiles this list of, I think it was 20-something different men that she had encountered from childhood up to what happened with the last man, which was Donald Trump. That was his role in this book. He was a name on a list, and she actually only named him in the book one time. She only said his name one time. She referred to him a few times in other words. She called him businessman, real estate guy, Mr. President. He was amongst other men. And now this is another thing I've heard many times, is that she accused several other men of R-wording her. And that's why she's not credible, and that she just does this. False. She didn't accuse any other men of R-wording her. She described instances with men where lines were crossed, maybe sexual misconduct happened, harassment, attempted attacks, suggestions, implications, where men just crossed the line, where she was made uncomfortable, where she was taken advantage of somehow. It ranged. So they weren't all R-word. She didn't accuse 20 men of R-wording her, okay? Only Donald Trump. So that's the book. Another big misconception that E. Jean Carroll wrote a book about being sexually assaulted by Donald Trump, and she did so to get attention and to make money, to take advantage of him. Something like that. I don't know. False. Because the book was not about Donald Trump. She even contemplated writing the story without actually ever naming him or even saying things that would dead give it away. She thought about that.
It was a horrible, violent scene, and it hurt and it was against my will, but I got out of it quickly, and I moved on. And then the election happened, and we saw 15, 16, 17 women coming forward with their stories. And Lee, I noticed that the more that women came forward and told their stories, the more popular he became. In this country, voters were attracted by the fact that he could take whatever woman he wanted. Donald Trump is the essence of that. He believed that women were there for his taking, and that's what he did.
As you say, so many women have come forward, and yet it seems to have no effect. Why is that?
You know, it's a conundrum, but taking a powerful man and stopping a powerful man in his tracks, Lee, takes not a few women, it takes hundreds of women. It took 40 years to bring Bill Cosby to acknowledge what happened and send him to jail. 40 years. He had lawsuits in 10 different states. And so it is very difficult to stop a powerful man. Donald Trump has what, 200, 300 lawyers. It is almost impossible. He denies everything, is what a powerful man does. Then he turns it around and attacks the woman.
And she describes at certain points in interviews later on, like she felt like a fraud. She felt like this do as I say, not as I do type person. She felt that conflict internally where it's like, how can you tell these women to go be brave and to, fight against this when you yourself haven't? And so she contemplated telling her story without saying his name. But this man was currently the president of the United States, and multiple other women had accused him of sexual misconduct. And so she knew it would be irresponsible of her to not say his name. It needed to be said. So that brings us to 2019, the event that sparks this all into action, okay? And that is when, about a month before her book is going to be released, she's going to do a marketing move for that. And what will usually happen is she'll contact some type of magazine or periodical, an author will do this, and then that magazine or whatever will interview the author and kind of get the promotion for the book out there. But Eugene did something different. Instead of allowing a different interviewer or journalist or whoever to take hold of interviewing her and have that control over what to focus on and what to promote, what to highlight, she wanted to avoid an interviewer or magazine taking this opportunity to make it about Donald Trump. But she sensed that coming. She sensed that people would focus on that part and likely want to hone in on it as the whole story. And she did not want that. So instead, being the double-decade columnist she was, she decided to write the essay herself and have it published in New York Magazine. And she did. And so it was a long read. It was over 6,000 words. And it was actually mostly just an excerpt from her book. And in this excerpt, mind you, it wasn't a part that had the one time that she named Donald Trump. It did not say his name at all. It mentioned him as the last man, but it did not say his name. And now, I'm sorry, but if you're trying to sell a book and get all this publicity and make your millions off of Donald Trump and accusing him of these false allegations and get all this attention and sell your books for this, I'm sorry, but for one, you would have wrote more about him in the book because readers are going to be pretty disappointed if that's why they're buying the book because it's very unfocused on. And then two, you're going to mention it a lot more heavily in the article that you put out to promote your book. But she did not do that at all. If you read the excerpt, it's all about the road trip, and it's all about her list of hideous men, which only ends with Donald Trump, where he's not even named. But at the same time that she didn't want to focus on that, she did acknowledge that this was her coming out with that story. She did acknowledge that it would be read, that it would be understood, and that this was something that she needed to speak out about. So while it was not the focus of her book, she was using this moment to come out with her story as well.
And also, the magazine had an obvious agenda as well and a responsibility to sell magazines. That was clear to Carroll and her team. So while Eugene did not say Trump's name and tried to find a way to control everything around the story that she could to where it wouldn't be so focused on in the actual content, New York Magazine did make her the cover story. And they did use a large statement about Donald Trump to very clearly bring in readers. That's what magazines do. And Eugene understood this. She reported being initially really surprised at the reactions that the book was about Trump, but she also knew how the media operated. She'd been in the field for a long time. So she just controlled what she could control. Overall, my point is just that a lot of people try to victim blame by making a victim out to be an opportunist, someone who's just speaking out and making this up because they want to get all this attention or get all this notoriety or something like that. And so they were doing the same thing to Carroll, saying that she just is doing this to get attention about Donald Trump. And so my point is, if someone was doing that, like for one thing, this was E. Jean Carroll's story to tell. And if it got attention because she told it accurately, sorry. Donald Trump was involved in the story, so it was her right to say his name, and she could have pushed it a lot further. She could have focused on it a lot more, and she didn't.
You've said that you're a member of the silent generation. We do not flap our gums, we laugh it off and get on with life. What do you think about this current generation that doesn't seem to want to respond that way?
Oh, I love them, because the silent generation, if a man was, as we said, fresh, we just hauled off and slapped him, just like, hit him. Slapped his face. You know what, that did not work. That did not change anything. We didn't change the culture. The young women today, they are actually, as you said at the top, they're making men lose their jobs. They're actually changing the culture of sexual violence in this country. So I love it. I love what they're doing.
For 26 years, you wrote the Ask E. Jean Carroll advice column in Elle magazine. What did that teach you about life and human nature?
It's my readers that educate me, because they start out with a letter and they tell me how they screwed up. And I think, okay, I can use that. And if you get hundreds and hundreds of letters from women, there's so much to learn, because these women are pouring their hearts into these letters. And they're asking me for advice. Basically, that's why I came forward, because they've been asking me, should they report their boss? Should they call the police when their husband beats up their dog? And there I am advising them what to do, and I have not come forward. So I decided, it's time to do it.
Thank you very much for speaking to us.
She made sure to address it by preemptively addressing what she knew would be likely asked of her. She addressed the fact that her memory didn't probably work the way that many would like it to have worked, where she didn't recall everything perfectly. She didn't know certain details because she just wasn't focused on those things at the time. She acknowledged that people might not be very happy with how she acts as a victim, because she's been in comedy her whole life, and that's how she deals with trauma. And she speaks on that's how women are often trained to deal with these types of difficult things, and this way of disarming men that might be trying to overpower them in this way, that oftentimes comedy and laughter neutralizes the moment, and that women often laugh in very dangerous or serious situations to cope, to lighten the moment, to get through it, to stabilize the energy. Oftentimes women laugh about things that make them uncomfortable. That's a very common thing. And she brings this up head on. She brings this up in the essay that she releases about this topic, because she knows this is what's coming. She knows what will be pointed out about her, but she's not going to lie. She puts in there, I'm going to be honest, and I may not be people's ideal perfect victim, but I'm just here to tell my story and the way it happened, and I can't be anything other than that. And the thing about this that was so telling was that this was E. Jean through and through. There was a track record of her being this way in the way that she addressed other people's issues, in the advice that she gave. She was on TV hosting a television show for a while, and this was her demeanor always. It was extremely in line with exactly who she had always been, without waver. So it was only normal to expect that she would be that same way under these circumstances. So while many would think it's weird that someone's laughing or making jokes about these types of things, or not wanting to call themselves a victim and not calling it the R word and calling it instead a fight because she wanted to feel like she won the fight instead of she was the victim of something, some people might think that's strange, but that just so matches who she's always been. It goes perfectly with her character, her personality, and it was just very much indicative that she was being genuine, that she was credible. I sensed that from her easily. I'm not going to sit here and use my intuitive nature as some kind of proof for anybody. All I can speak on is what I sensed. This is just on top of doing extreme fact digging and evidence and taking it all into consideration as a whole. Without any of what I'm about to say, it's still very clear. There's just plenty of evidence of what happened. But paired with then the natural just feeling I got from her natural way of being is just so, I don't know, to me, it was plain as day to read her. And I can't imagine that anyone that unless they were first listening with an already preconceived notion about her that was just determined to discredit her and find fault with her and make her out to be something else, how anyone could not see exactly what I saw. It's so blatant and obvious. She's just E. Jean. She's just quirky. She's unrehearsed, maybe a little awkward, but so real, just so real. And I mean, it's evident. You can see it right away. But not to worry, I didn't judge off of that. I continued to listen to hours and hours and hours of evidence and facts about this situation in this case. So there you go. All right. Well, we traveled through quite a few decades there, exploring E. Jean Carroll's life up to this moment. But now we're going to hop into the time machine and we're going to go visit someone else. And I'm going to tell you how all of those preemptive measures that E. Jean took while finally coming out with this big secret, finally getting this off of her back, her shoulders. I am going to now go and show you how all of that was just tossed out the window and exactly what she was assuming would take place went ahead and took place anyway. Big time, beyond her control, because E. Jean had no plans to do anything more with it. It was going to end there with her book, and that was it. So let's get in our time machine and go visit Donald Trump in 2019. Okay, here we go.
All right, let's go. Donald Trump is chilling in the White House, I would presume. Not positive, but anyways, we're visiting Donald Trump, okay? And so on this day, someone comes to Donald Trump and says,
Look at this.
what is this? Is a New York Magazine essay. And in this essay, Donald Trump is being accused of sexually assaulting the woman writing the essay in the 1990s in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room. I cannot tell you how he reacted in this moment because we have no evidence of that, but I would say we can assume that he is probably pretty used to this by now. He's had quite a few accusations up to that point. This is kind of like a routine thing for him. So I'm not sure how he reacted, but I'm certain that he denied it. And I know this also because then the next thing that happened is Trump immediately got right to responding to this allegation. And he, in an official government statement, first said this did not happen. He denied that he ever met Carroll. And then he said that Bergdorf Goodman had confirmed that they had no surveillance footage of the alleged incident. So he had, I guess, talked to them about this. And then lastly, he called to the public to take action on this. And he asked the public to provide information that would show that Carroll is obviously conspiring with the Democratic Party. Dun, dun, dun. That's what this is about. Or maybe New York Magazine. So those are the main statements he initially made about it. So very on brand with his typical responses to allegations like this. Then separately, he had an interview with The Hill.
The president telling The Hill, quote, "I'll say it with great respect. Number one, she's not my type. Number two, it never happened. It never happened, okay?" Carroll firing back on CNN.
I love that. I am so glad I am not his type.
She's not my type. Essentially saying,
If I was going to sexually assault a woman, sure wouldn't be her.
I don't know how to take that. You know, like if someone said that about me, it's like, okay, I mean, I don't want to be your type for that, but like rude. I don't even know how to, it's a catch-22. It's like, I don't even know how to feel about that.
She's not my type.
Well, she was that day.
Roasted!
But according to Donald Trump, she wouldn't be the pick. She wouldn't be the one I would sexually assault. Such a weird thing to say.
This is also not the first time the president has commented on his accuser's looks. At a 2016 campaign rally, then candidate Trump had this to say about a woman who accused him of groping her on a plane years before.
Believe me, she would not be my first choice, that I can tell you. Man. You don't know. That would not be my first choice.
Thanks, I hate it. Now, obviously, E. Jean knew that Donald Trump was not going to be very happy about this, but she didn't expect him to say such harsh things about her that weren't true. And she also did not realize the amount of backlash she was going to get from his supporters, people that were going to come for her and threaten her life. And there was weird threatening things happening around her property. She was feeling very unsafe. And then Elle magazine actually fired her immediately after Donald Trump's comments. They eventually said that it was just a business decision, but clearly it was because of what happened. Like, that's so, I don't know how they got away with saying that. Like, this is just so ridiculous. Obviously, it was because of that. It's just like the biggest like news story of the moment. And they're just like,
No, we haven't seen that. No, this is just seems random.
like, come on now. Obviously, it was because of this. All these years she had been having that career, her dream, you know, and it was gone in a flash because of that. So she was just beside herself, like,
Okay, everyone's looking at me like I'm making this up.
And she hadn't really even told the story. You know, the book didn't come out till the following month, and she really didn't talk about that part of it in the excerpt very much. So CNN invited her on for an interview to respond to the president's comments about her. And she went. This interview. This was a really hard topic for E. Jean. I think she kept herself together very well. She was ready to face it. But when it aired, her personality just didn't fare well with a lot of people with what she was having to discuss. So being quirky and a little offbeat and saying awkward things, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes, you know, people like that. So that doesn't fare well sometimes with certain topics. And something so serious like this, it was bound to come off to some people as a little odd. And so there was some awkwardness in this interview, and people just took it and turned it so upside down.
And she openly talked, as she always does. She's someone who just says what is on her mind. Here's something I want you to understand about Carroll, that for me, because I took my time really digging into this woman because I wanted to know who this woman was. I wanted to get a very objective view of her, the complete scope of her. I wanted to see her in every light, the good, bad, the ugly, okay? And so I listened to her book. I read the whole transcript from the trial, everything I could get my hands on, where she spoke, every interview. I read her column. I did everything to dig into it, who this woman was from all angles. And E. Jean, she's one of those people. I don't know if you've ever had a friend like this, but you know, when it's like, some people are telling a story and they're picking out all the parts that just kind of like make sense. And you can tell maybe they're playing up one part of this, or they left out this little detail because like it would have kind of made them look bad and it really wasn't that important. You know, things like that. Like there's certain parts of a story that it's like, that really doesn't play into the outcome. So you could probably just leave that out and not like highlight that part that might be like in your favor. Well, she's one of those people that has no interest in doing that. She will tell parts of stories that don't make her look good, that she will tell how she really feels about something that maybe isn't the best look, that might make people go, well, you're just this person, you know, like that will make her get judged. It could just make her look bad, just make her disliked in some way, just put a bad light on her, like something that you just don't need to say. And I personally have a friend who is like this. And what I really always loved about this friend was that just dependable, raw authenticity. It's like I could really count on the fact that the stories that she was telling, because whether it made her look crazy or made her look bad or just like wasn't favorable for her, she was going to tell the story the way it was. She was going to tell the truth and all the details, everything. And I really respect that in people. You don't have to wonder about people like that, because it's like, she didn't need to say that part, but it's like, she's just honest like that. That's just how she is. And so I just really picked up on that with her. And I mean, for me, that made her all the more credible. And Donald Trump was proven to be lying in many things that he said. And the jury picked up on this too. And the judge picked up on this too. So I want to go to the interview and just show you one particular part that people just ripped her to shreds about, where it was misconstrued and twisted and turned into something different than what she actually said and what she was obviously meaning. So take a look.
The prior accusations, which have all been of forms of assault or harassment, you're saying there was actual penetration?
Yes.
Did you, puts it into a different category of any of the other women who have come forward? I think that is the definition of rape. One definition.
That's the definition. Yes.
How long?
Brief. Mm-hmm. Brief, because when a woman is stamping her feet,
and that's what you were doing. You started stamping your feet.
I always think back and think, that was the stupidest thing I've ever done. I should never have done it. And then I didn't behave.
When you say I should have never done it, you mean?
That was just a dumb thing, to go into a dressing room with a man that I hardly know and have him shut the door and then be unable to stop him. And I was a competitive athlete, so I wasn't like I didn't freeze. I rose to the occasion, and it did not last long. And that's why I don't use the word you just used. I use the word fight.
You don't use the word rape.
Sexual violence is in every country, in every strata of society, and I just feel that so many women are undergoing sexual violence. Mine was short. I got out. I'm happy now. I'm moving on. And I think of all the women who are enduring constant sexual violence. So this one instant, this one, 3 minutes in this little dressing room, I just say it's the fight. That way I'm not the victim, right? I'm not the victim.
You don't feel like a victim?
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished, which the word rape carries so many sexual connotation. This was not sexual. It hurt.
But I think most people think of rape as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
We're just going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Okay, we can all acknowledge that it was a cringy moment. We can. Okay, it was a little cringy. A little awkwardness, right? Yes. But the way people took this and ran with it and made it into something else.
People continue to repeat that Carroll said is sexy. And because Carroll spoke about Donald Trump accurately and didn't change the way that she talked about when she was telling the story, when she's describing how things were for her before this happened and the way that she viewed Donald Trump, she describes that accurately, despite the way her view of him has now changed. So people got very confused at why she's describing him as handsome and charming and her being excited to have this opportunity and thinking that he was a cool person, feeling so lucky that she was getting to hang out around him and feeling a little starstruck. People seem to not understand that she's just being honest. If you ran into a celebrity out in the world and there's somebody that you thought was so attractive or something like that, or you thought they were so cool and you're just geeking out over them, and then they violently attack you and you now don't like them so much, and now they've said all these horrible things about you when you come out with the story, it would be inaccurate to then tell the story like,
yeah, I saw them. This jerk, I'm a dumb, rude person.
What did you think about?
I think he's an idiot.
you know, it's like, but you didn't think that when that wouldn't be accurate to the story. But people didn't like that she was saying nice things about him. And it was then interpreted as,
she's an obsessed fan. She's weird. She wanted it.
Excuse me? Like, no, she didn't. And it's just wild the way people will twist it. Even Donald Trump himself saying, like,
I swooned her and she said it was sexy.
And it's like, okay, I thought it didn't happen, my guy. What makes sense is that is how she felt about it until the incident occurred. Okay? Duh. And then look, you have an interview where she's talking about a topic that she has held inside for, 20 years at this point? And she's on television talking about it with a very well-respected television journalist, which was Anderson Cooper. She's a little bit excited about talking with Anderson Cooper. That's natural. She's not right there in the throes of the trauma of it anymore. And she's an older lady at this point. She's never been a very filtered person. And she's kind of getting these questions, you know, that they're not pre-rehearsed. And she's answering on the spot and under nerves. And you have to go off of what they're asking you. And I don't know about you, but I definitely fluster up on the spot. I definitely do. But I don't feel like she did too terribly. But the way that she presented her thought process on this, it didn't, in my opinion, get to be fully explained. But it's very evident exactly what she meant. And she's not wrong. So one thing that a lot of people are saying about this interview was she said that rape is sexy because she thinks that rape is sexy. Okay, so number one, she said the exact opposite of that. She said she does not think it is sexy. She does not think that this was sexual and it was a fight and that there was nothing sex related about it. She didn't think of it as sex, and that is why it was hard for her to call it what it was, which was R word, because she feels like that has a connotation with it in media, in movies, in TV, and it has this connection to sex, which is an intimate act. Okay, she's like she said, I wasn't thrown to the ground and ravished. It was a fight. It was forced upon me. And now there's another way to look at that, which Anderson Cooper brought up and said, well, most people, I think they think of R word as, you know, a violent attack. And she said, no, I think that most people think of R word as sexy. I think that most people think of R word as sexy. Not, I think that R word is sexy. Not, this was sexy. No, she said, up to that point, she had been explaining the exact opposite. She said it was not like, that is not how it was. It felt nothing like that to me. It hurt. It was a attack and it was a fight. I was fighting and then I won and I got out. So that's why I didn't want to categorize it like that. Okay? And then she explains, I think most people think of R word as sexy. And then the awkwardness comes from, at that very moment, Anderson Cooper has something in his ear where producers are telling him it's time to go to the commercial break. So he's listening to that. She says this thing that's, you know, very whoa, and definitely needed some more explanation. And so he kind of tries to do both, but then he says, we're going to have to take a quick commercial break, but we're going to talk more about this when we come back. Okay. And then so when he says that, E. Jean, I mean, the way I see it, the way it looks to me, at that moment she thinks, okay, we've just broke for commercial. So then she makes a comment to him that is a personal comment in saying, you're fascinating to talk to. She's just talking to the interviewer and saying, you know, like, you're fascinating to talk to. She was expressing gratitude for this exchange, gratitude for giving her this platform to have this voice on, and just kind of like thanking him for doing this with her and complimenting him. And it didn't have anything to do with the conversation they had just been having, because he had just said, we're cutting for break. We're cutting for a commercial. And that's when she said that, okay? Now, it just so happened to have followed her saying that she thinks most people think that's sexy. So, inconvenient, okay? But she never once said that she thinks that. She said quite the opposite. And she said that she thinks people think of the fantasies, and that's what she did not want this to be associated with, because it was nothing like that. And so what she is referring to is not untrue. Think about it. Popular media and stories. We have 365 or something like that, I think it's called, where he literally kidnaps her and essentially is essaying her against her will, which the whole thing is that she ends up liking it. And I mean, hello, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. Lots of essay in that one. One of the main characters, Khaleesi, the dragon mother or whatever the hell she is. Her first husband literally takes her, kidnaps her, and R-words her. Like, he literally kidnapped her. She didn't get to choose. He took her as a wife and forced her. And then in the show, she learns to love him by him essaying her. Okay, so that's exactly what she's talking about. That right there, because that's disturbing. But that is a prevalent theme in a lot of our media. It really is. And it's not good, because nothing about R-word is sexy. And that's what she was trying to point out. So she did not want it to be associated with. She didn't want to be part of the salacious stories of Donald Trump being confused as a womanizer, when all he was a predator and someone who attacked her and that she had to fight. Okay, that's what she meant very clearly. But everybody wanted to say,
that's weird. She said sexy. She's, what? Why would someone say that? That's weird. She's obviously lying. What a weirdo. Da, 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 da.
They would not let this woman live or breathe after this. Donald Trump took this and ran with it. He was like,
she's a weirdo. She thought, I guess I swooned her.
The event that never happened, he was like bragging about how he swooned her in the thing that never happened. Didn't make any sense. But it just brings me back to my point about how people just always love to harass a victim by saying,
well, what took her so long to come out about it? Why didn't she talk about it sooner? Why did it take her this long to speak up?
And it's like, hey, have you ever paused to think about what happened when she did? Hey, have you ever paused to think about what always tends to happen when women do? Very typically, especially if the man that they're accusing has notoriety, popularity, power. What happens? Think about it. And you can answer your own question. Hello. It's so simple. It's obvious why people don't. Because you can't have it both ways. You can't, on one hand, just berate, discredit, completely shame, cast this woman out and act like she's a complete liar, talk negatively about her and totally dismiss her claims when she comes out about something, and then turn around with the same mouth and ask why she would wait so long to come out about it. Hello. Hello,
friend.
Hello. Because it's only ever the naysayers that ask that question. Answer your own question, bro.
Next thing that happened was Carroll said,
okay, you don't know me at all. Wow, interesting.
And so then she submitted one of the infamous photos that became part of the trial, which was a photo that she had prior to this happening that shows her and Donald Trump and then her husband of the time, which was John Johnson, and Trump's first wife, Ivanka. And it shows the four of them socializing, very friendly, at some type of an event. Okay, well, I think you met her. I think that proves it. And so she submitted this photo and said,
okay, there you go. You met me.
What would Donald Trump have to say about that? He'd have to admit it, right? He brushed it off and said,
standing with my coat in a line, give me a break. With my back to the camera.
And he says,
I have no idea who she is.
So he doubles down. Surprise, surprise. This is what sparked the first inklings of litigation for this case. Well, this is one of the first things I constantly heard about this case. People constantly said,
he was not convicted. He was exonerated. He was found not guilty in criminal court. That's why he went to civil court.
And that is not true. That's not what happened. It is correct to say that he was never found guilty in a criminal court, but that is because no criminal charges were ever brought upon him, not by the state and not by Carroll. That was never pursued. And that was because, for some reason, crimes like sexual assault have what's called a statute of limitations. Apparently, our justice system sees our word of a woman as something that you can outgrow or something. If you get like enough tokens on your punch card or something, enough years you go without being prosecuted for it, you get like a wash of it or something. I don't know. It's like a bankruptcy on your credit. You know, you go enough years and it's like it never happened. For some reason, I don't know why, certain crimes even have that. I would think that sexual assault should be one that does not have a statute of limitations, but it does, and it did. And this was beyond that. So that had already been exceeded. Carroll was never planning on doing anything to Donald Trump. She didn't write this book to pursue any legal action against him. She simply wrote the book because she wanted to write her story. And so the litigation occurred because Donald Trump decided to go in public and deny that he even knew Carroll, call her crazy, say
she's not my type,
and talk badly about her appearance, put her down, and make her out to be this psychotic crazy woman that was just making things up that he had never met in his life. And so the reputation that Carroll had, the long-spanning career, she was being defamed, and she was getting backlash because of that. A lot of it. Death threats, lots of very scary things were happening to her because of Donald Trump saying that he never met her and never did this.
In her new book, What Do We Need Men For?, the longtime advice columnist described the alleged assault she says happened around 23 years ago inside of a dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman, writing, Trump was forcing himself on her, adding, it turns into a colossal struggle. I try to stomp his foot. I try to push him off, alleging it didn't stop until she says, I turn, open the door, and run out the dressing room. Carroll says she never reported the incident to police, but ABC News spoke with two of her friends who did not want to be named that back her account, telling us she confided in them after the alleged incident. Trump has faced more than a dozen allegations of sexual misconduct or sexual assault, all of which he has denied. Carroll says the president's response to her allegation is similar to that of other accusers.
He denies, he turns it around, he threatens, and he attacks.
At some point, Carroll ran into a lawyer that she knew from some sort of acquaintances, and it was George Conway. George Conway was a Trump critic, openly, and he is the husband of Kellyanne Conway, if you know who that is, I don't know. And it was George Conway that said to Carroll, after learning about the situation, that she needed to file a defamation lawsuit against Donald Trump, because that is exactly what was happening to her, is defamation, and serious defamation because of the negative impact it was having. And so he said he would help her find a lawyer to bring that case upon Donald Trump. It was not initially a case for sexual assault. It was a case for defamation, for denying the sexual assault and denying ever knowing Carroll. And then in November of 2019, E. Jean Carroll filed a defamation lawsuit with the New York Supreme Court. And in this lawsuit, she stated that Trump had damaged her reputation and substantially harmed her professionally and caused her more emotional pain. The lawsuit was filed, and White House press secretary at the time was Stephanie Grisham, and she described the lawsuit as frivolous and Carroll's story as fraudulent. Surprise, surprise. All right, it's time to get back in our time machine. We need to get back to year 2020. All right, let's go. Boop, 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 boop. All right, we're here. Initially, Trump just dismissed the case by saying that he had presidential immunity. That's what he said publicly. The case was underway, and cases like this, they take time. They need to compile the evidence. They need to prepare. They need to secure a jury and get everything ready. So that's what Carroll's team was in the process of doing at this time. And one of the first things that they were working on was the fact that Carroll still had the dress that she wore the day that this happened. And so maybe there's some DNA on it. So her team submitted this dress for DNA testing. And of course, Carroll's DNA was on the dress. And also there was unidentified male DNA found on the dress. Okay. Whoa. So the next thing they did was request Donald Trump to submit his DNA to be compared to the unidentified male DNA. This should have been a slam dunk for Trump if he was telling the truth, because he did in fact say,
I do not know this woman.
So, I mean, we know he had met her because we see a picture with him and her. But let's say that was the only time he ever saw her. Okay. Then presumably, actually factually, this would not be his DNA. There's no way that this would be his DNA. So of course he would submit his DNA, right? Like that's duh, right? Well, he didn't get right to it, because first on September 8th of 2020, the DOJ steps in for Trump. And this is the DOJ that was led by Attorney General Bill Barr at the time, and they put forth the Westfall Act. This is a law that shields federal employees from personal liability for any actions taken within the scope of their employment. And so the way this plays out is if a federal employee is sued for any actions that take place within their duties as a federal employee, the DOJ can then step in for them as the defendant and replace them in the case. Okay? Now, this was a very strategic move because if this was to be upheld, you cannot sue the government for defamation. So this would essentially just kill the entire case. It would be over. So this was pretty worrisome for Carroll's team. So then fast forward to October of 2020. The judge in the case, which would be Judge Kaplan, he rejects the DOJ substitution. He completely rejects the motion and he rules that the president is not a government employee and that Trump's comments about Carroll were not made as his official duties or in the scope of his presidency anyway. So the DOJ then appealed that ruling. And so that decision then had to move on to the Second Circuit Court for an appeal. And now appeals, they can take a long time because basically they have to build a case. The decision has to be made by a whole different court. So that's when the case got kind of derailed off of the normal trajectory of just preparing for the trial, and it got dragged into extended limbo. So then, you know what happened in November of 2020? Donald Trump did not win the election, contrary to what he believes, and Biden became president. So as the president changed, the DOJ also transferred to the Biden DOJ. This next part was so odd, and the DOJ got a lot of backlash about this. Biden's DOJ did decide to weigh in on this and file a brief with the Second Circuit Court stating that they are going to back up the Westfall Act.
What?
And no one saw that coming. A lot of people thought that the DOJ under Biden would just throw that out and this would not need to proceed forward. They would just go into trial. But no, they decided to uphold the same motion. Wildly, especially since Biden himself had already publicly criticized Trump for using the DOJ as his own personal law firm. Okay, so it wouldn't seem that he would promote his DOJ to uphold that motion. But I think in a way that kind of speaks to the fact that the way it's supposed to be. The president is not supposed to be interlocked with the DOJ. They're supposed to be independent. So it would make sense that they would not always align the way that it seems to under Trump. A lot of people speculated that the DOJ was less concerned with some type of loyalty to Trump, at least the Biden one, and more concerned with setting a precedent for the presidency and not holding a president liable into some type of civil suit or being sued for actions taken during their presidency. That's what was the best explanation. Okay. So this really stalled things. It just kept stalling. Now, move forward to October 12th, 2022. And we're baffled again because Donald Trump decides to do the very thing, again, that he is awaiting trial for, that he is being sued for right now, that has not made it to trial yet, that he doesn't even know for sure if the DOJ is going to sub in for him. And he just does the very thing again that he's in trouble for, which is defaming E. Jean Carroll. And he goes on Truth Social and he makes a post about it. And it's lengthy. And in this one, he attaches a photograph of Carroll that was from 2019, the age that she is at that time. So depicting her as an elderly woman, the way that she looks today, and then goes in on her about how he doesn't know this woman, she's insane, and he just has no idea who she is. So I don't know what was not clicking up there for him. I think that just really attests to the fact that Donald Trump often truly believes that he is above the law and that he can do whatever he wants. So of course, Carroll sees this post. Once again, she is hit with a slew of backlash, of death threats, all kinds of terrible negative outcomes of Donald Trump bringing her up again, doing this weird thing where he's trying to depict her as the age she is now, as if that is how she appeared back when this happened, when we know she looked more her age then. She looked different, and he shouldn't be throwing stones from a glass house. He's looking not too hot himself sometimes these days. Just saying. But anywho, and Carroll is gorgeous, and I think she's a cute woman, and I think that it's very rude to talk about her appearance because she's literally just the cutest. I don't understand, but to each his own. To understand how this played out, I think you need to hear the Truth Social post. So here it is. Trump says, "This Miss Bergdorf Goodman case is a complete con job in our legal system in this country, but especially in New York. Just look at
Peekaboo James. James Comey, I don't know, is a broken disgrace. You have to fight for years and spend a fortune in order to get your reputation back from liars, cheaters, and hacks. There's just so many of them. There's just liars and cheaters and hacks everywhere. It's all over the place. This decision is from the judge who was just overturned on my same case. I don't know this woman. I have no idea who she is, other than it seems she got a picture of me many years ago. By the way, E. Jean is clearly in the picture, not taking the picture, so pretty sure it was like the photographer at the event. Anywho, with her husband shaking my hand on a reception line at a celebrity charity event. She completely made up a story that I met her at the doors of this crowded New York City department store and within minutes swooned her. I don't think that's what she said, sir. It is a hoax and a lie, just like all the other hoaxes that have been played on me for the past 7 years.
The over 25 different hoaxes about the women that are saying the exact same thing about me that have happened over... Yeah, so many hoaxes. Jeez.
And while I'm not supposed to say it, I will. This woman is not my type.
Unbelievable.
She has no idea what day, what week, what month, what year, or what decade this so-called event supposedly took place. The reason she doesn't know is because it never happened, and she doesn't want to get caught up with details or facts that can be proven wrong. If you watch Anderson Cooper's interview with her, where she was promoting a really crummy book, you will see that it is a complete scam. She changed her story from beginning to end after the commercial break to suit the purposes of CNN and Andy Cooper.
She didn't.
Our justice system is broken, along with almost everything else in our country.
Including elections, apparently, according to him.
Really butthurt at this time. Her lawyer is a political operative and a Cuomo crony who goes around telling people that the way to beat Trump is to sue him all over the place. She is suing me on numerous frivolous cases, just like this one. And the court system does nothing to stop it. Poor Trumpy. In the meantime, for the record, E. Jean Carroll is not telling the truth, is a woman who I had nothing to do with, didn't know, and would have no interest in knowing her if I ever had the chance. Now, all I have to do is get through years more of legal nonsense in order to clear my name of her and her lawyer's phony attacks on me. This can only happen to Trump.
He puts it in quotations. How's that? Now, oddly enough, not actually one of his craziest Truth Social posts, matter of fact, but quite unhinged nonetheless. So, now how he thought that was not the exact same thing he's being sued for, I do not know. He had to have. But Carroll sees this, and there's just a fighting spirit within her that has been reawoken since she put out this book, and she felt like she really got her fire back, and she wanted to live in silence no more. She wanted to be bullied no more. And so when Trump did this, she decided she was going to file another suit, because now Donald Trump is not the president and he's again defaming her. So that's when she filed her second lawsuit for defamation in November of 2022. Now, the universe also, out of nowhere, just totally unrelated to this, in New York, they suddenly enacted the Adult Survivors Act. It's like the universe just handed this little gift down right into Carol's lap, right at this perfect time. And this act was a law that allowed sexual assault victims whose cases had already exceeded the statute of limitations. They would be able to still pursue legal action through a civil case where they could sue their perpetrator with no statute of limitations. Magical! That's amazing. First of all, that's just an amazing act. Very happy to hear that New York passed that. I mean, great job. Thank you. So this time, when Carroll goes to file her second defamation case, she includes another charge, and that is the one for sexual assault. So case number 2, filed November 2022 for defamation and sexual assault. This was a separate court case, okay? At some point prior to this trial, Donald Trump was deposed. He was on a recorded deposition, and that's what he opted to do instead of testifying on the stand. So he instead was asked questions from Carroll's lawyers on a taped deposition, and then that was submitted for trial. So he did not actually attend the first trial. He was not there, and he did not testify in that trial. Parts of that deposition were actually used to corroborate the evidence on Carroll's side and helped to find him liable. So he didn't do very well in that. And I'll bring some of that out during the trial. All right, we got to get in this time machine because we need to head on over to 2023 and get a move on here towards the first trial. So let's get in. We're here. Let's go. Here we are in March of 2023, and some key evidence that was being evaluated for whether or not it would come to trial and get in front of the jury. 2 pieces that were very important to Carroll's case were accepted this month, and that was number 1, the Access Hollywood tape. The Access Hollywood tape is the one where Donald Trump is infamously talking about how when you are a star, you don't need to ask or wait. You can just grab women by their private part, and they just let you. You can do whatever you want. That's what he says. Of course, his team did not want this as a part of the case, but it's highly relevant. Because in the incident with E. Jean Carroll, Donald Trump specifically did exactly that. He literally grabbed E. Jean by the you-know-what. So very relevant that he thinks that that's okay for him to do. And then also testimony from 2 other women who had alleged that Donald Trump had done something very similar to them. One was Jessica Leeds, and she was the person that you saw him talking about, coincidentally, on that 2016 tape at his rally, where he said nearly the exact same thing about her appearance. Where
She wouldn't be my type. She wouldn't be my first pick.
I don't know why he thinks that makes him look good and why he thinks that's a normal thing to say. Just really bad. And then the other alleged victim was Natasha Stoyanov. She was a journalist for People magazine who was actually assigned to interview Donald Trump and Melania, a then pregnant Melania, in 2005. And he also talked badly about her, and he talked bad about how she looked. Same thing. He did the same exact thing to both of those victims back then, those alleged victims. So now he was finding out in March of 2023 that their testimony would also be admissible in this trial, that they would be allowed to come and testify that they were attacked by Donald Trump in this similar way. Made a lot of sense, okay? But Trump's team did not like that because it did make too much. It made a little too much sense. And think about it. It's not like they didn't want it in there because it's not true. Trump's own words. Why would they not want Trump's own words? He said that. Why would they not want it? Maybe because it's talking about assaulting women openly, you know? Okay. All right, so here we are in the 11th hour. Basically, this trial is about to get underway. And as typically, Trump's tactic is to outlast people, just run them out in trial. So he'll motion and he'll bring up objections and things like that. I don't know what the words are, exactly what the terms are, but I think he just would bring forth motions to delay the trial. Constant tactics of delaying, and he just waits them out. And most people get tired of fighting it. They run out of steam emotionally, they run out of it physically, and they run out of money, probably sometimes. And he just wears them down. And so this trial was about a few weeks away, and they had nothing.
Yikes.
This is why Donald Trump dislikes Judge Kaplan so much. He was not dealing with any of their nonsense. He very flatly denied nonsense delays that they wanted to try to put forth when they had nothing to do with the case, when they didn't make sense. He just said,
No, I will not. No, we will not look at that. No, that is not relevant.
And that made Trump infuriated, even though Donald Trump's DNA had been being requested since back in 2019. And he had been asked over and over and over throughout the discovery period of that timeline, up to the time that the discovery period ended, when they were no longer accepting evidence to put forth in the trial. Donald Trump repeatedly opted to not submit his DNA. And in a civil trial, he's not required to. Doesn't look so great for him in any way, but he decided no. And so at one point, when the discovery period was ending, Carroll's team, this is years now, okay? We're in 2023, and it's been asked for since 2019, repeatedly, and repeatedly outright refused, okay? And so when the discovery period ended, Carroll's team decided that they would just leave the DNA issue out of the trial completely. So they rescinded their input of the dress to be used as evidence. So it was no longer going to be included in the trial at all. They agreed to let it go. And so because they did that, it was not allowed to be brought up in the trial. They weren't allowed to say
There was DNA that wasn't identified on this dress.
now in what could only be determined to be a completely desperate attempt at just putting this off more so they could find something or make up something. I don't know. Right before the trial, Trump suddenly said,
I want to submit my DNA.
But there was a stipulation, and it was that, but there's so and so many pages missing from this DNA report that was given from the crime lab with the male DNA, and it's the appendix, which is just more info on how they, like the rundown of the DNA, like the very specific material, like every little, you know how DNA is very, what's it called? Very elaborate thing. So it's like there's a, I guess when you get a DNA profile, there's an appendix and it shows like the breakdown of that DNA, very detailed. And so initially, when that was submitted, the appendix was not submitted. It was only those first pages. And it was very clear that they were not including that part. It wasn't hidden. It was just, that part's just not in it. It wasn't any like reason for it. It just wasn't necessary. So the only reason that, I mean, anything would have moved forward was if Trump submitted his DNA. He never did. So That part was never brought into question. It didn't matter. So what Trump's team decided to do was make it seem as though this was a big deal to them and that they would go ahead and they actually want to submit Trump's DNA now for the trial, but they want those pages. They need those pages produced before they will do so. The thing was, the discovery period was over. No new evidence was being submitted. No new evidence was being approved of. And it was very clear that this was simply an offering to either stall the trial because they weren't ready, and just put it off again, which they were constantly trying to do, or it was just something that they knew would be denied because they knew that the discovery period was over, but would give him a public story that he could sell, where he could say,
I tried to give my DNA, they wouldn't let me.
And he did just that. So if you've heard that Trump did try to give his DNA and then they would not allow him to, that is because he repeatedly refused to give it, and then only offered to give it when he knew that the discovery period for the DNA was well over and he knew it would not be allowed. And he knew that what they were asking for was not something that was left out of the file to hide anything, but they wanted to spin it that way. And then they were also planning to try to murky that throughout the trial. They were going to try to bring that up and say,
well, there was DNA and Trump's DNA was not allowed to be evaluated. He was not even allowed to submit his DNA.
They were going to try to use that in some way. But Judge Kaplan went ahead and made sure that they knew that they could not bring that up. Both sides were not allowed to mention DNA whatsoever. After that, Trump was out of options, out of stalling tactics, and the trial began on April 25th, 2023.
Thank you for watching my video, Click on the other one and watch part 2, or I will find you, and you better be subscribed, or I'm gonna go crazy on that air.